All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the show. Today is Tuesday, December 28th, 2010, and tonight we're going to go completely commercial-free for the next 3 hours. Should be a fantastic show. And joined with me for the duration is my guest. You can check out his material, his work, up at the website, theglobalreality.com. All of his documentary films, 9/11 New World Rising, The Secret Right Volume 1, as well as all of his archives of his radio show. And I'm, of course, talking about none other than Josh Reeves. Josh, how you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing great, Lee. It's great to be back on with you again. It seems like it was just yesterday that we were doing our 2009 wrap-up show, and here we are again wrapping up 2010, so I'm real glad to be here tonight.
It's amazing how fast time has gone by, and yeah, it just seems like yesterday that we were doing the end-of-the-year show for 2009, and now all of a sudden, here we are at the end of 2010 going to 2011, and it's really amazing to see all the things that have transpired and taken place over the past year or so. And so that's kind of what I wanted to get into on today's show. Of course, we have plenty of time to get into that. But first, I just want to get your take on some of the stuff that you've been doing and catch up on some of the things that you've been looking at and some of the stuff that you've been working on in terms of your films, your radio show, and everything. So if you could give everybody a quick update, I think they'd like to hear about it.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that opportunity to do that. We've been continuing to work on the Secret Right Volume 2, which we're planning on having out by the end of next month and the end of January. Where people can pre-order those right now if they want to at my website, theglobalreality.com. We're working on getting that out by the end of next month. On the radio show front, I'm continuing to research the next level of topics I'm going to be getting into in films and some of the up-and-coming films I'm going to be doing after the Secret Right Volume 2 are out. I'm going to be working on a film that is going to delve into transhumanism, into the next level of technology and how that is associated with human enslavement and this idea of creating the perfected man, which also associates with one of the ideas that has been a foundation of the illuminated fraternities for many years, this idea of the perfected man. And this is exactly where the whole transhumanist agenda comes in. And I think that there is this year in 2010, to me, on top of everything else that we're going to get into tonight, I can definitely say there's been a ramp up in not only acclimating people to the coming transhumanist agenda and the singularity, but I think there's also little warnings being put out there. I think more and more things are being put out into the consciousness that is saying, you know, let's sort of take our time here before we attach ourselves completely with all of this technology. In many ways, we already are. Very few things in our world anymore, Lee, are done without the use of computers. You know quite a bit about this, as that's the field that you're in professionally. But
yes.
That's, you know, the whole thing about it is that we're surrendering more and more of our own responsibilities over to these machines. And this is a dangerous path if it continues in this way. So I felt that on top of these topics of exposing the Council for National Policy and the phony patriots, as you are as well with your work and your films, I think the next level of that, to me, to start really delving into and look and start warning people about is this idea of transhumanism and merging with machines. So that's some of the newer topics I'm going to be pushing towards working on and getting films out on in 2011.
Yeah, the whole topic of transhumanism is something that really interests me. And, you know, when you take a look at what these secret societies believe in, especially the Illuminati, of course, the Los Alumbrados Society, which you started looking into a little while ago, and I was looking at that, and you take a look at them, and they basically have the same ideas as the people who are pushing ahead this transhumanist agenda of essentially creating a human being that can live forever, achieve immortality, or achieve godhood. So it's definitely a very fascinating subject, and certainly something we've been talking about a lot here. So perhaps as we go through the show, we can get into that topic a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. But first, I mean, I want to go over 2010, and there were really just so many things that transpired over this past year. And I kind of want to get your take on some of the major events that occurred. Of course, we had the BP oil disaster. We had the Haiti earthquake, and we had WikiLeaks. And I'm sure there's a few others that you can throw in there as well. But what's your take on the year 2010? Of course, phony disclosure, I think, is another one that we could point to. We're seeing a lot of stories coming out, like the release of these X files and UFO files. So, I mean, since we have plenty of time here, What's your take on some of these big events that occurred throughout 2010, and what do you think were some of the biggest events, most important events that transpired over this past year?
Well, it was really hard to put one event over the importance of another anymore, Lee. I guess when you really start to understand that no matter which one of these topics that we choose to talk about or discuss, really, they're all encompassing of the same agenda and the same master plan and the same great work that these people are instituting. So whether or not we're talking about the Gulf oil disaster, or whether we're talking about WikiLeaks or anything else, all of these agendas and all these different topics that happened in 2010 or any other year, when you really break them down, and especially with the voluminous amounts of evidence that we've had concerning any of these events as being a part of the grand master plan, I think there's enough evidence to support that on any of these topics, certainly with the Gulf oil disaster, certainly with the WikiLeaks thing now. And so that's what's fascinating to me, is that on the surface of these news stories that grab our attention, and as I've talked about on my show many times, regardless of whether or not we are in this day and age, having any faith whatsoever in the mainstream media, regardless of whether we like it or not, oftentimes even those us in the alternative media and underground media are sort of we're sort of slaves to the news cycle as much as anybody else is, because that's what we do. We report on this news and try to really show people where the truth lies in these stories, and because that's what the mainstream media doesn't do. So I think that I think that for us, those of us who, when the oil disaster was happening, and those were the majority of the stories that were coming out, what were we talking about? That we were talking about the oil disaster. And so all of these different events, to me, seem like lead-ups or little bits and pieces of, the grand, wide scope view attack that these people are now initiating that maybe we don't really see all of yet. I think we got little bits and pieces of it. But I started to think that some more and more of these events are maybe happening as distractionary issues. I think sometimes they have a thing like, the oil disaster, or they have something else going on so that we're focused on this. Meanwhile, there's 5 or 6 other agendas that we're hearing about. The biggest thing this year for me really was the taking of the body scanner issue at the end of the year last year, when we were discussing things like the alleged attempted Christmas Day bomber that happened last year, the crotch bomber, and that whole situation. Right. We were discussing that. And then as soon as that event happened, here comes the TSA and here comes the Department of Homeland Security rolling out these body scanners they already had in the airports, in boxes, waiting to go in prior to that event. And up until just recently, in the past few months, I remember when we first started talking about that, Lee, we were called conspiracy theorists, and people were saying that it was a conspiracy theory about these body scanning machines. Doing the fact of some of these stunts that were pulled by people like who, getting people to strip naked for a protest, all this stuff. And then the next thing you know, it becomes a mainstream meme, and the body scanner thing becomes an issue just like everything else. And I think we talked about this last month on your show, and the whole issue about, remember when the Don't Tase Me Bro issue happened, and everybody started making that a meme, and everybody started repeating that phrase, Don't Tase Me Bro. But in the end, a lot of people remember that phrase, Don't Tase Me Bro, but few people remember why he was tased. And that was, of course, we're asking John Kerry about his membership in Skull and Bones. Same type of situation here. I think more and more people are starting to make these topics and more mainstream, so that, as I've mentioned before, they sort of become a trend and they become a trendy thing, and then people leave them behind. I think this is why they're making more and more quote unquote informational type of shows available on cable channels, like, of course, the History Channel's Ancient Alien show, which as of late has been not only putting in info that was a couple of years ago considered taboo even in the research community. Now they're coming out, especially in the last 3 episodes, with more and more disinformation, more and more scaremongering over the fear of hostile ancient or hostile extraterrestrial invaders. And I love how in this most recent episode of Ancient Aliens, they actually mentioned that one of the things that these hostile aliens would do would be, it was like naming off things. It was like, abduction, blah, 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 this, vivisection. And it was like, well, I was like, what? That's a hell of a thing to throw in there. Why would you just throw in there just randomly as a side thought that aliens might come down and commit vivisection on us, cut us into little pieces and examine us and all that stuff? It just seems that as more and more they're disclosing things, the more and more fear factor is ramping up on the idea that if aliens are real And if they do indeed exist, they 100% have to be hostile. And that goes contrary to a lot of things we've heard. There have been many witnesses and many people who have claimed to be abducted by extraterrestrials through the years that have claimed that they were shown pictures of, nuclear bomb blasts going off, and they were showing things that of mankind dying off, and basically a warning saying to people that, look, you need to go tell your leaders that you need to fix this problem. And there have been people that have also speculated these extraterrestrials might be trying to contact us and try to basically show us where we're going wrong, thus bringing an end to the power structure, the New World Order, and the entire Great Work. So it seems to me that when you look at it from that angle, it would be in the best interest if they were going to reveal to us that these extraterrestrials do indeed exist, that they would have to be hostile, because then no matter what you believe, whether or not you believe mainstream or whether or not you believe underground information, everyone would be convinced this was a hostile threat and we needed to arm against it. And so I think it's a continuation of the expansion of the military-industrial complex, and the next level of that is space, and it's going to go on and on and on, because it's kind of like Al-Qaeda. If you've got, hundreds and thousands of extraterrestrial races out there, that
alien Al-Qaeda,
they could possibly want to wipe out Earth, then hey, that's an endless enemy we can arm against forever, isn't it? Just like Al-Qaeda.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a very interesting point. And I think one of the things that you touch upon that I found very interesting, and something that I've really noticed, is that they're basically trying to take this type of research, the alternative research community, and they're trying to turn it into this cheap pop culture version of what it should be. With what you said about the "don't tase me, bro," or the guy who complained about his junk being grabbed. They use these catchphrases and they try to turn into this pop culture type of garbage. And I think you really see that with who, of course. He seems to be at the forefront of trying to turn all of this into this cool, trendy pop culture thing. And quite frankly, that's going to serve to discredit the actual information. We're already seeing that with the Jesse Ventura True TV show and some of his other garbage. So what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, I think that's traditionally what they've always done with any sort of grassroots, anything that's propped up out of the ground that hasn't been a CIA or some sort of intelligence community funded front. I mean, certainly the anti-war movement in the 1960s started out grassroots and then became anything but that. But that's what they do, because if they drive something home enough to people, long enough to get a large amount of people interested in it, they can then get a lot of those people to then leave it behind and not look at it anymore, because they'll say, oh, well, I was into that a couple of years ago. I'm not into that anymore. The way that the modern societal mind works is we don't really stick with anything for too long. We're into fads and trends, and we're into those things for a little while, and then we leave them behind, and then we're on to the next fad and trend. I mean, really, the majority of society is like that. I know there are exceptions, and there are a lot of people that aren't like that, and probably many of our listeners and people that we know. But for the mass majority of people out there, it is this very, okay, I'm on to something, I'm into it very intently, and then I'm on to the next thing. And I think that this is exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to create trends in this type of information. I've seen it happening for a long time. I mean, I'm sorry, nothing against any researchers out there, but sometimes if I go to like a Barnes and Noble or something, Lee, and I see, I see a Jim Marrs book or a David Icke book, I'm just going, and next to a bunch of other disinfo stuff, I'm just kind of going, I mean, are you really going to get out real hardcore information if you're able to sell your books in a mainstream bookstore like Barnes and Noble or something? Probably not. I mean, certainly not in this day and age. So I think that's one of the things more and more that we're seeing is they're doing just like they did with the New Age movement. The New Age movement was something as well that was sort of started by grassroots people, and then of course you have these priest class bozos come in and take it over. So the trend that is happening right now to the research community is the same trend that's happened to everything. I think that's why it's up to us and the few of us who are out here trying to expose things like the Council for National Policy and the Jesuit Order and the higher reaches of this stuff. What I was talking about yesterday on my show, I was calling it the half-truth movement. I don't even call it the truth movement anymore. It's the half-truth movement, because they're only giving people half the truth. And I think the time is coming, Lee, where it's time to separate the men from the boys. Everybody out there that hasn't got into the CMP stuff yet and hasn't wanted to accept it, you need to step up to the plate and realize that all of this is going to go bye-bye, and no one is going to want to even give two craps about what happens to the world if telling the truth becomes a trend that can be thrown away like Beanie Babies or Cabbage Patch Kids or anything else. And let me tell you, that's what they're trying to do right now, Lee.
Well, here's the thing, and I talked about this on my show previously, is that you have to